Have you ever just watched a child playing and wondered, what is actually going on in their head? I mean, how do they go from being this tiny, helpless baby to a person who can argue, imagine, and solve really complex problems? Well, let's dive into that amazing journey of how we all learn to think. This is the big question, isn't it? It's one of the great mysteries of just being human. The whole transformation is so huge, it almost feels like magic. But as we're about to see, it's actually a process of gradual, pretty predictable growth that we call cognitive development. So, that's the official term for this incredible transformation, cognitive development. And, it's about so much more than just learning facts in school. This is about the evolution of the very machinery of our minds. How our mental software for thinking, remembering, and problem-solving gets more powerful and more sophisticated over time. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at the fundamental building blocks of thought, as described by the legendary psychologist Jean Piaget. Then we'll walk through his famous 4 stages of growth, see how modern science has kind of updated his ideas, and then we'll wrap up with why all of this really matters to you. To really get a handle on this field, you have to start with Jean Piaget. I mean, this guy completely changed the way we think about children's minds. His ideas, even now, are the absolute foundation for so much of what we understand. So Piaget's big idea was totally revolutionary. Before him, the common thinking was that kids were basically just passive, empty containers, and adults would just pour knowledge into them. Piaget completely flipped that script. He argued that kids are like little scientists. They're actively exploring, constantly running experiments, and literally constructing their own understanding of how the world works, one brick at a time. So how do these little scientists get the job done? Piaget said they use schemes. You can think of a scheme as like a mental blueprint or a little program for an action. A baby, for instance, develops a banging scheme. They figure out that banging a rattle makes a cool noise, so then they try banging a spoon, then a block, then a toy car. They're running this little mental program over and over to explore and learn about their world. And this leads us to our next tool, assimilation. When that baby uses their favorite banging scheme on a new object, like a wooden block, they are assimilating it. They're fitting this new experience into an existing mental category, into their things I can bang file. It's how we all make sense of new stuff, by trying to fit it into what we already know. But what happens when the baby tries to bang an egg? Whoops, it breaks. The old banging scheme just doesn't work. This forces an accommodation. The child has to change or adapt their thinking. Maybe they create a new scheme, things to bang hard and things to touch gently. And that very moment of adjustment, that little aha moment when the mind has to rewire itself, that is the engine of real learning. So, this constant cycle of assimilating and accommodating, it's what drives us forward through what Piaget is most famous for, his 4 distinct stages of cognitive development. He believed we all go through them in the exact same order, kind of like climbing a staircase of thinking, where each step unlocks brand new abilities. And here's the whole staircase at a glance. You can see the 4 stages, the typical age ranges, and the major mental superpower that gets unlocked at each level. But don't worry about memorizing it all right now. Let's actually climb this staircase step by step, starting right at the bottom. First up is the sensory motor stage. This is where infants learn about the world entirely through their senses and their physical actions. The absolute game changer in this stage is mastering object permanence. See, for a really young baby, if you hide a toy, it has literally ceased to exist. Poof, gone. So learning that it's still there, just hidden from view, is a massive cognitive leap. It's really the beginning of memory and symbolic thought. Next, we enter the pre-operational stage. This is where language just explodes, and kids can use symbols to represent the world. A cardboard box can become a rocket ship. A banana can be a telephone. But their thinking still has some very clear limits. It's often egocentric, which means they genuinely struggle to see a situation from someone else's perspective. It's not that they're selfish. Their brain just can't really compute that another viewpoint exists. Then comes the concrete operational stage. And the word concrete is really key here. Children can now think logically, but it's mostly about real physical things they can see and touch. They finally master ideas like conservation, realizing that if you pour juice from a short, wide glass into a tall, skinny one, you don't magically have more juice, even if it looks taller. Their thinking just becomes so much more organized and rational. And finally, we reach the formal operational stage. This is where our thinking breaks free from the concrete world. We can now reason about abstract ideas, concepts like justice or infinity, and we can think about hypothetical situations, all the what-ifs. This allows for true scientific reasoning. So, to solve a problem like what makes this pendulum swing faster, we can now systematically test all the variables: the length of the string, the weight on the end, how high we drop it from, one by one. That is abstract scientific thought in action. Now, Piaget gave us this incredible blueprint for cognitive development. But, science is always building, testing, and renovating. So let's take a look at how modern research has updated our understanding of his really groundbreaking work. First things first, let's be crystal clear. Piaget's contribution was monumental. He set the entire field of developmental psychology on a totally new course. The questions he asked and the framework he created are still incredibly influential today. But like any great scientific theory, it's been tested and tweaked over the decades. One of the biggest modern updates really challenges a core principle. Piaget believed that you had to reach a certain developmental stage before you could learn certain concepts. Basically, that development had to come first. Modern research, though, shows it's more of a two-way street. It turns out that targeted learning and different experiences can actually speed up a child's journey through these cognitive milestones. So, to kind of sum up the modern view, we see a few key issues with the original theory. First, we now know that children are often way more capable than Piaget gave them credit for, especially if you present a task in a familiar, kid-friendly way. Second, development might be less like a rigid staircase of stages and more like overlapping waves, with different skills developing at different rates. And finally, the power of our experience and culture has a much stronger influence than he first imagined. Okay, so we've journeyed through schemes, stages, and some scientific renovations. But so what? What does all of this mean for us in our daily lives when we're actually interacting with the kids in our world? All right, here are the big takeaways. First, always remember that kids are actively working to understand their world. They are builders, not passive sponges. Second, and this one is so important, their mistakes and their sometimes strange logic aren't because they're being difficult, it's because their minds are operating under a completely different set of rules. They think differently. And knowing this helps us become way more effective and a lot more patient as guides on their journey. So I'll just leave you with this thought. The next time you see a toddler having a total meltdown because you cut their sandwich the wrong way, or a 5-year-old who just cannot grasp your point of view, maybe you'll see it a little differently. You're not just witnessing a mistake or a tantrum, you are getting a direct glimpse of a mind under construction, working exactly the way it's supposed to.